working. Hello. Oh, my mouth isn't working again. Use microphone. Select a microphone. Use headset microphone. Okay, it is set for headset microphone. Headset microphone is catching everything. I'm going to lock model here. Nothing on here should change. Right? But no. It's not responding at all. I don't get it. I just don't know why the hell it's... This is frustrating, chat. It really is. But for many of you, it's probably not the most frustrating thing in the world right now. Oh, well. Now it's trying to act like it's going to cooperate now. What the hell? Camera, you're being a pain in the ass. I really don't know why you're doing it, or what the hell I can do to fix it, because... Well, so I don't know what it's doing. I can't really fix it, can I? I need to understand the problem before I can fix the problem, and frankly, I don't. It's almost like some sadistic fuck is playing with my system. But surely no one would do that, right? The real question is, I can't even hear myself now. What the hell? No, because my stream's completely glitched out again. I can hear me crunching. I guess that's a good sign. What's a good sign? Now I'm stuck again. Fuck me. Apologize for language, Cubs. It's just that kind of day. The world is trying to... the world is trying to turn... trying to turn into a grimmer place than it already was. I don't know what to tell you, Cubs. Like it says, I sure as fuck didn't vote for him. Like I'm going to say that I know rather distinctly that my vote probably didn't count for anything. As I am the only one who voted one way. The 5 immediate voters in the family. Writing down the name of the first story so I don't forget. The Cubs. This is honestly an example of why I don't want to bring any more kids into the world, because this world is going to hell. And I really don't... What are you doing, VTube Studio? I was not standing on top of my ottoman. This is ridiculous. Ridiculous. VTube Studio, what are you doing? Or is it OBS? It's not wanting to cooperate. VTube Studio is locked in place on OBS. The model is locked in place on VTube Studio. What the fuck is happening? Why is everything going chaotic? Okay, I have one browser window open. Just this one. The only thing going right now is Discord, VTube Studio, OBS, and one window of Brave that I can watch the stream on. That's it. I should not be getting chaos. Should not. Do not want. Chaos is bad. I'm already needing another freaking cough drop, and I haven't even started the stream properly. I'm getting an actual cough drop this time. How far into... We're already 9.5 minutes into the second attempt of the stream tonight. I've lost 125 frames? Damn. Chaos is just spreading like mad. This world is gonna end up like toasted in a fiend fire. I just know it. And I don't want to have to live through it again. The same thing happens every time. I wonder when the stoning is going to start. Gonna be lurking? Okay, Kami. Let's say, what art are you working on tonight? Man, I hate the audio delays. Because I'll see it's like I see the message in chat, then I respond to it, and then like 20 seconds later, it actually goes to stream. It's crazy. My microphone is picking up my cough drop. I didn't think I had that much of a buffer on the system. I don't think I have buffer on the system at all. It only says I've got a 1 second stream delay and it's not even turned on. Oh well. Oh. And OBS goes crazy again. I picked up a book and it turned me half scale. It did it in VTube Studio, so I don't know what's going on. So I'm just going to switch over to the storytelling screen because I don't have to worry about it then. And I forgot to put up the right book. Sorry, I've been distracted today. All right. Well, Cubs, if you've got your warm milk and everything else and you're ready to go to bed, I guess I could read you some bedtime stories. I do try to keep it to roughly 2 hours. Maybe a little bit longer since it is a Friday, and I'm sure everyone needs a little bit of stress relief after the chaos that's happened today. I do have the Pokemon community game going, so if you catch a Pokemon, let me know. I will probably hear a message saying something, but probably not. But anyway. If you do by chance want to get my attention, I do have the sound alerts on. So there's always that. Let me change microphones real quick so I can make it a little bit harder for you to hear me chewing on a cough drop. And the microphone is stereo, so it sounds a little bit better. But hey, that's what streams are for, right? Stuff happens. And even the scariest fairy tales don't compare to some of the stuff going on in reality. So, our first story for the night is The Old Woman in the Forest. There once was a poor servant girl who went traveling with her masters through a large forest, and they were passing through the middle of it when some robbers came and murdered all the people they could find. Everyone was killed except for the maiden, who had jumped from the carriage in her fright and had hidden behind a tree. After the robbers departed with their booty, she came out of her hiding place and burst into bitter tears. "What am I to do?" she said. "Oh me, I'll never find my way out of the forest. I don't see a single house. I'm bound to starve to death." She walked about searching for a way out of the forest, but couldn't find one. When evening came, she sat down beneath a tree, commended herself to God, and planned to remain there no matter what might happen. But after she had been sitting there a while, a white dove came flying to her with a little golden key in its beak. It put the key in her hand and said, "Do you not see the large tree over there? You'll find a little lock on it, and if you open it with this key, you'll find plenty of food inside. You won't have to suffer from hunger any more." So the maiden went to the tree, opened it, and found milk in a small bowl, and a white bread to dip into it, so she could eat to her heart's content. When she was full, she said, "Now's the time when the chickens at home usually go out to roost. So tired, I wish I could lie down in my bed." Then the dove flew by again, carrying another little golden key in its beak, and said, "Open the tree over there, and you'll find a bed." She opened it, and found a lovely soft bed. Then she prayed to the dear Lord to protect her during the night, lay down, and fell asleep. In the morning the dove came a third time, with another little key, and said, "Open that tree over there, and you'll find some clothes." When she opened it, she found clothes lined with jewels and gold, more splendid than those of a princess. Thus she lived for some time, and the dove came by every day and took care of everything she needed, and it was a good, quiet life. However, one day the dove came and said, "Would you do a favor for me?" "Gladly, with all my heart," said the maiden. "I'm going to lead you to a small cottage," said the dove. "You're to go inside, where you'll find an old woman seated right next to the hearth. She'll say good day to you, but you're not to answer her, no matter what she does. Go past her to the right, where you'll come upon a door. Open it, and you'll find a room where there will be a lot of different kinds of rings lying on a table. You'll see magnificent ones with glistening stones, but you're to leave them alone. Pick out a simple one that will be lying among them, and bring it to me as fast as you can." The maiden went to the cottage and through the door. There sat the old woman, who glared at her and said, "Good day, my child." But the maiden didn't answer her, and proceeded toward the door. "Where are you going?" cried the old woman, who grabbed her skirt and tried to hold on to her. "This is my house. Nobody's allowed to go in there if I don't want him to." Those were procedures. But the maiden kept quiet, broke away from the woman, and went straight into the room. There she saw a large number of rings lying on a table, glistening and glimmering before her eyes. She tossed them about and looked for a simple one, but couldn't find it. While she was looking for the ring, she noticed an old woman slinking by with a bird cage in her hand. The woman was about to make off with it, but the maiden went up to her and took the cage out of her hand. When she lifted it up and looked inside, she saw a bird with a simple ring in its beak. She was glad and ran out of the house with it. She thought the white dove would come and fetch the ring now, but it didn't appear. She leaned against the tree, intending to wait for the dove. And she was standing there. The tree seemed to become soft and flexible, and it lowered its branches. Suddenly, the branches wrapped themselves around her and were two arms. When she looked around her, she saw the tree had turned into a handsome man, who embraced her and kissed her affectionately. "You saved me from the spell and the power of the old woman," he said. "She's a wicked witch, and she had turned me into a tree. For a few hours every day, I was a white dove. As long as she possessed the ring, I couldn't regain my human form." His servants and horses had also been released from the magic spell, but they had also caused them to be changed into trees, and they were now standing beside him. Then they all traveled to his kingdom, for he was a prince, and the couple got married and lived a happy life. All right, then. I can't say that I've heard that one before, but there's a lot of stories I haven't heard, and then there's some that I've heard several versions of now. The cough drop seems to be helping a little, which is a good sign. Our next story, The Three Brothers. There once was a man who had 3 sons, and he owned nothing but the house in which he lived. Now each of his sons hoped very much to inherit the house after his death. Since the father cared for them equally, he didn't want to hurt their feelings, nor did he want to sell the house because it had belonged to generations of his ancestors. Otherwise, he would have divided the money from the sale and shared it among his sons. Finally, he had an idea and said to his sons, "Go into the world and see what you can make of yourselves. Listen and learn, and when you return, whichever one of you puts the best performance of his talents shall get the house." The sons were satisfied with this proposal. The eldest decided he wanted to become a blacksmith, the second a barber, the third a fencing master. Then they agreed on a time when they would all return home, and finally set upon their way. It so happened that each one of them found a good master, and each learned something decent and useful. The blacksmith had to shoe the king's horses, and thought, "Now he will certainly get the house." The barber shaved only distinguished gentlemen, and believed that the house was already his. The fencing master received many cuts, gritted his teeth, and didn't let himself become discouraged, for he thought to himself, "If you're afraid of a cut, you'll never get the house." When the appointed time arrived, they went back home, but they didn't know how to show off their talents in the best way. So they sat down together and discussed the matter, and while they were sitting there, a hare came running across the field in their direction. "Oh," said the barber, "that's just what I needed." He took a bowl and soap and worked up a lather until the hare was close by. Then he lathered it on the run and shaved a little beard for the hare, also on the run. In the process, he neither cuts the hair nor hurt it in any way. That's a challenge. "I like that," said the father. "Unless your brothers do something extraordinary, the house is yours." Before long, a man came riding by in a carriage at full speed. "Now you see what I can do, father," said the blacksmith, who rushed after the carriage, ripped the four horseshoes off from the horse, and continued to gallop, and put on four new ones, also at full speed. "You're a remarkable fellow," said the father. "You do your things just as well as your brother. Now I don't know who I should get the house." Then the third son said, "Father, let me show you what I can do." And since it had begun to rain, he took his sword and swung it over his head, and made crosscuts, so that not a drop of rain fell on him. When it began to rain harder, and then finally so hard that it was pouring cats and dogs, he swung the sword faster and faster, and remained as dry as if he were sitting safely under cover. When the father saw that, he was astonished and said, "That's truly the best performance. The house is yours." That sounded like Voldemort. Oh. The other two brothers accepted the decision, as they had promised to do, and since they cared for each other so much, all three of them stayed in the house together and practiced their crafts. Indeed, they had learned their skills so well and were so talented that they had earned a great deal of money. They lived happily together in this way until their old age, and when one of them fell sick and died, the other two grieved so much that they too fell sick and died. Since they had all been so skillful and cared so much for each other, they were all buried in the same grave. Wow. Honestly, that's probably a good brother story right there. Every other time there's a fight over a house, they end up killing each other. But that's kind of a happy ending. They all died, but still it's a happy ending. And I got to sound like this on purpose. Okay. If anyone's using a closed caption, it would be hilarious to see what it's actually say. Anyway. Our next story. Give me a second. Ooh. Okay, I muted there. I was going to burp, but apparently I keep walking on. So try not to burp live on chat. Well, live on. You know. Anyway. Our next story, my dear cubs. The Devil and His Grandmother. There was once a great war, and the king, who had many soldiers, paid his men so poorly that they couldn't live off their wages. Wow, that's tough. Three of his soldiers got together, therefore, and planned to desert. Two began talking, and one said to the other, "If we're caught, they'll hang us on the gallows. So what do you think we should do?" "There's a large wheat field over there," said the other. "If we hide in it, nobody will ever find us. The army won't enter the field." Burn it. So they crept into the wheat field and sat there for 2 nights and 2 days, and almost died from hunger because they couldn't go out into the open. Finally they said, "What's the sense of deserting if we have to die a miserable death?" Good one. Just then a fiery dragon came flying above the wheat field and asked, "What are you three doing down there in that wheat field?" "We're three soldiers," they said, "and we've deserted the army because we couldn't live off our pay anymore. Now we'll die of hunger because of an army that's all around us, and we can't find a way to escape. Well, if you'll serve me for 7 years, said the dragon, I'll take you right through the middle of the army in a way that nobody will catch you. We don't have a choice, so we'll accept your offer. Then the dragon grabbed them in his claws, took them under his wings, and carried them through the sky to safety. Afterward, he set them down on the ground again. The dragon, however, was none other than the devil, and he gave them a little whip, and all they had to do was crack it, and they'd have as much money as they wanted. With this whip, you'll be able to live like great lords, keep horses, and drive around in carriages. But at the end of 7 years, you'll be mine. Upon saying this, he took out a book, and they all had to sign their names to the agreement. But, he added, before you're finally mine, I'll give you a riddle, and if you can solve it, you'll be free, and I'll have no power over you. Then the dragon flew away, and the 3 soldiers began their journey with their little whip. If a dragon comes along, you must whip it before the creature comes along. Down, whip it up. They always had plenty of money, ordered the finest clothes to be made for them, and traveled about the world. Wherever they were, they lived joyous and splendid lives. They drove around with horses and a carriage, and ate and drank well. The time went by quickly, and as the 7 years were dawning to an end, 2 of them became extremely anxious. But the third took it lightly and said, Brothers, don't be afraid. Perhaps we can solve the riddle. When they were all together, an old woman came along and asked them why they were so sad. What's it to you? You can't help us. Who knows? She said. Just tell me your troubles. So they told her that they had been the devil's servants for almost 7 years, and he had supplied them with money as though it were water. However, they had signed their lives over to him, and would become his if they couldn't solve a riddle after the 7 years were up. If you want some help, the old woman said, then one of you must go into the forest, where he'll find a cliff that's caved in and looks a little bit like a house. Well, that won't save us, thought the other 2 sad ones, as they remained outside the forest, while the cheerful one set out on his way and found everything just as the old woman had said. Inside, he found an ancient woman sitting there. She was the devil's grandmother, and asked him where he had come from and what he had wanted. He told her everything that had happened, and since she found him very appealing, she took pity on him and lifted a large stone. You ought to sit there quietly. When the dragon comes, I'll ask him about his riddle. At midnight, the dragon came flying home and wanted his dinner. Okay. This makes me feel a little bit better about some people because even the devil is living with his grandmother. Oh, God. Okay. The grandmother set the table and brought food and drink. This made him happy, and they ate and drank together. During their conversation, she asked him how his day had been and how many souls he had captured. I've got 3 soldiers lined up. They'll soon be mine, he said. Oh, 3 soldiers, she said. Yeah, tough. We might still get away with from you. They're mine for sure, responded the devil scornfully. I'm going to ask them a riddle they'll never be able to solve. What kind of riddle? Let me tell you. There's a dead monkey lying in the Great North Sea. That will be their roast. A whale's rib will be their silver spoon, and an old horse's hoof will be their wine glass. When the devil had gone to bed, the old grandmother lifted up the stone and let the soldier out. Did you pay close attention to everything? Yes, he said, and had to leave by a different way so that the devil wouldn't notice him. So he went quickly through a window and rushed back to his companions. Once there, he told them what he had heard. Now they could solve what no living soul had ever solved. Indeed, they were all so cheerful and in such good spirits that they took the whip out, snapped it so they had plenty of money. And when 7 years were completely up, the devil came back with his book, showed them their agreement, their signature, and said, "Now I'm going to take you with me to hell, where you'll be given a meal. However, if you can guess what kind of roast you're going to have, you'll be set free, and may keep the little whip." Then the first soldier began to talk. "In the Great North Sea, there's a dead monkey. That'll probably be the roast." The devil was annoyed and went, "Hmm? Hmm? Hmm?" and asked the second soldier, "What will be your spoon?" "The rib of a whale will be our silver spoon." The devil made a face and muttered, "Hmm." Again, and asked the third soldier, "Do you know what your wine glass will be?" "An old horse hoof will be our wine glass." I don't really know how that would be a riddle. That's kind of weird. Oh. With that, the devil flew away and abandoned them. He no longer had any power over them, but the three soldiers kept the little whip. Indeed, they whipped up so much money that they wanted whenever they wanted money, and lived happily until the end of their days. A dead monkey carcass from the North Sea, a whalebone for a spoon. Fly my book. Stellar. And a horseshoe for a wine glass. How is that even considered a riddle? Admittedly, it is the devil doing it, so this is why you don't make deals with the devil, kid. Unless you talk to his grandmother, because she might find you appealing. So, three soldiers saved by one grandma. Lovely. Oh, wait. No, wrong Ferdinand. Yeah. So, our next wonderful story from the Book of Grimm is Faithful Ferdinand and Unfaithful Ferdinand. Once upon a time, there lived a man and a woman who didn't have any children, while they were rich. But when they became poor, they had a little boy. Since nobody was willing to stand as grandfather godfather for their child. The father said that he would go to the next village and see if he could find one. Along the way, he met a beggar who asked him where he was going. The father told him that he was going to see if he could find a godfather for his son, since nobody was willing to act as a godfather in the village because he was so poor. "Oh," said the beggar, "you're poor and I'm poor, so I might as well be your godfather. But I'm so poor that I won't be able to give your child anything. Go home and tell the midwife to bring the child to the church." When they arrived at the church, the beggar was already inside, and he named the child Faithful Ferdinand. As he was about to leave the church, the beggar said, "Go home now. I can't give you anything, and I don't want you to give me anything either." However, he gave the midwife a key and told her to give it to the father when she reached the house. He was to keep it until the boy became 14. At that time, the boy was to go out to the heath, where he would find a castle. The key would fit the castle door, and everything inside would belong to him. When the boy was 7 and had grown nice and strong, he went to play with some other boys. Their godfathers had all given them presents, one more wonderful than the other, but faithful Ferdinand had nothing to talk about. He burst into tears and ran home to his father. "Didn't I get anything at all from godfather?" he asked. Um, yes, said the father. "You received a key. If there's a castle on the heath, you're to go there and open it." Kid's only 7, don't give it to him yet. So he went to the heath, but there was no sign of a castle. When 7 more years had passed and he was 14, he went to the heath again. And this time a castle was standing there. And when he opened it, there was only a horse inside, a white horse. And the boy was so excited to have a horse that he mounted it and galloped home to his father. "Now that I've got a white horse," he said, "I'm going to travel about." 14. Well, it has to be 11 to venture after Pokemon, so I guess this is a little dated. So he set out, and as he was riding along, he found a pin along the way. At first he wanted to pick it up, but then he thought to himself, "Oh, you'd better leave it there. You're bound to find a pin when you're going to need one." But just as he was about to ride away, a voice called out from behind him, "Faithful Ferdinand, take me with you." He looked around, but couldn't see anyone. Then he went back and picked it up. After he rode on for a while, he came to a sea, where he discovered a fish lying on the shore, gasping for air. I guess technically gasping for water, but still. "Wait, my little fish," he said, "and I'll help you back into the water." He grabbed the fish by the tail and threw it back into the water. Then the fish stuck its head out in the sea and said, "Since you helped me out of the mud, I'm going to give you a flute. Whenever you're in trouble, play it, and I'll come to your aid. If you ever drop something in the water, just play it, and I'll get it out for you." That's my fish. Thank you, Lord. Now faithful Ferdinand continued on his way, and he came across a man who asked him where he was going. "Just to the next town." "What's your name?" "Faithful Ferdinand." "What do you know about that? We have almost the same name. I'm called Unfaithful Ferdinand." The two of them traveled to the next town together. There was trouble ahead. Unfaithful Ferdinand knew everything that everyone thought and wanted to do. He knew all this because he practiced all kinds of black magic. Now, at the inn where they decided to stay, there was a fine maiden who had an honest face and nice manners. Lovely manners. She fell in love with faithful Ferdinand, for he was very handsome, and she asked him where he was going. He told her that he was just traveling about. and she said that he really should stay the night there, because the king of the country wanted to hire a servant or a forerunner, and he could work in the king's employ. He responded that he couldn't just go to someone out of the blue and offer his services. Then the maiden said, "Oh, I'll take care of that." She does not sound like a maiden at all. Try that again. "Oh, I'll take care of that." Okay. She went straight to the king and told him that she knew of a fine servant for him. The king was glad to hear this and had Faithful Ferdinand summoned. When the king wanted to make him a servant, Faithful Ferdinand asked to be a forerunner because he wanted to be with his horse. So the king made him a forerunner. His horse's name was I guess. When Unfaithful Ferdinand learned about this, he said to the maiden, "What's going on? You can't just help him and forget about me." "Oh," said the maiden, "I'll help you too." And she thought, "I'd better keep on his good side, for he's not to be trusted." So she went to the king again and said that she found a servant for him, and the king was pleased. Now, whenever Unfaithful Ferdinand addressed the king in the morning, his majesty would always complain, "Oh, if only my beloved could be here with me." Since Unfaithful Ferdinand kept a grudge against Faithful Ferdinand, and since he also kept hearing the king's lament, he finally said, "You have a forerunner, don't you? Why don't you send him to find her, and if he doesn't bring her back, have him beheaded?" Well, so the king summoned Faithful Ferdinand and told him that his beloved was in such and such a place, and Faithful Ferdinand was to bring her to him, and if he didn't succeed, he would have to die. Faithful Ferdinand went straight to his white horse, who was kept in the stable, and began to sigh and moan, "Oh, what an unlucky person I am." Then he heard a voice behind him. "Faithful Ferdinand, why are you so crying?" He turned around, and since he didn't see anyone near him, he continued to moan, "Oh, my dear little white horse, I must leave you now. I'm going to my doom." Then he heard the voice again. "Faithful Ferdinand, why are you crying?" Suddenly he realized for the first time that it was his horse talking. "Is it you, my little white horse? Can you talk?" And he continued, "I've got to go to such and such a place and fetch the king's bride. Can you tell me how to do it?" "Go to the king," the white horse replied, "and tell him that if he'll give you what you need, you'll get her. And you'll need a shipload of meat, a shipload of bread to succeed. There are huge giants in the sea, and if you don't bring them meat, they'll tear you to pieces. And there are huge birds who'll peck your eyes out if you don't bring them bread." So the king ordered all the butchers in the land to slaughter animals, and all the bakers to bake bread until the ships were fully loaded. Then they were full, the white horse said to Faithful Ferdinand, "Now I want you to go climb on my back and go aboard the ship with me. When the giants come, you're to say," precisely, "Easy does it, my dear giants. Don't think that I've forgotten you. I've brought you meat to chew." And when the birds come, you're to say, "Easy does it, my nice dear birds. Don't think that I've forgotten you. I've brought you bread to chew." Then they won't do anything to you. And when you come to the castle, the giants will help you. Just take a few of them with you and go up to the castle, where you'll find the princess lying asleep. But you mustn't wake her. Have the giants pick her up with the bed and carry her to the ship. Then everything happens where the little white horse sitting. Faithful Ferdinand gave the giants and the birds the meat and bread and had brought with them. In return, the giants willingly carried the princess in her bed to the king. When she arrived at the king's palace, she told him that she couldn't live without her private papers that were still in her castle. So Faithful Ferdinand was summoned once again, and an instigation of Faithful Ferdinand. And the king commanded him to fetch the papers from the castle. Otherwise, he would have to die. Whew. So Faithful Ferdinand went into the stables, where he began moaning and said, "Oh, my dear little horse, I must go away again. What shall we do?" The white horse told him to have the ships fully loaded as before, and everything happened as it had the first time. The giants and the birds ate their fill of meat and bread and were appeased. When they reached the castle, the horse told Faithful Ferdinand to go into the princess's bedroom, where he would find the papers lying on the table. So he went in and got them. When they were on the sea again, he let his pin drop into the water. At that, the horse said, "Now I can help you." But Faithful Ferdinand remembered his flute, and he began to play. As soon as the fish came with the pin in his mouth, he gave it to him. Afterward, Faithful Ferdinand brought the papers to the palace, where the wedding was to be held. The queen, however, couldn't stand the king because he didn't have a nose. That would have been good information to know beforehand. On the other hand, she loved Faithful Ferdinand very much. One day, when the noblemen of the court were gathered together, the queen said she knew some tricks. She said, in fact, that she could cut off the head and put it back on, and she wanted a volunteer to demonstrate her skill. Nobody wanted to at first, but upon Unfaithful Ferdinand's prompting, Faithful Ferdinand felt obligated to volunteer. The queen cut off his head and put it back on, and it healed immediately. Only a red thread appeared around his neck where she had cut him. "My child," the king said to her, "where did you learn to do that?" "Oh," she replied, "shall I try it out on you too?" "Oh, yes," he said. Then the queen cut off his head, but she didn't put it back on again. Rather, she presented she couldn't get it back on because it wouldn't stick properly. So the king was married, and she married Faithful Ferdinand. So, yeah, kid's maybe 15 by now, at the most. No. Afterward, Faithful Ferdinand continued to ride his white horse, and once, when he got on it, the horse told him to head for another hearth, where he knew, and to gallop around it 3 times. When Faithful Ferdinand did this, the white horse stood up on its hind legs and turned into a prince. And that was a very abrupt ending, because there's nothing else after that. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Not really listening to that story. It's crazy. That gives us a red thread, though. Okay. Another cough drop, because it has been doing a little bit of I was saying it right before I coughed. How did I wrap a broken cough drop? Alright, Cubs. The next story we have. We're going to run out of stories in this book, too. God. Nice. Stories, books, I don't run out of nice. The last one is book in this on page 473. 473. We're on page 413. I will have to find a new book for this next month. Whatever shall I do? Turns out I'm going to have to find another one to replace the Norwegian for folktales. But given today's events, I may do the controversial Southlands one. Anyway, couples. What's the number now? 29, I kind of figured it would be a lot of people. Ah, what's on? Maybe some. I guess the real question would be, who will be on in another hour? Anyway. And coffee. Okay. Our next story for the night is The Iron Stove. Oh, the first title. This is the first time is there. You'll get it when I say the first sentence. Anyway, The Iron Stove. In the days when wishing still helped, an old witch cast a spell over a prince so that he had to sit in a big iron stove in the forest. He spent many years there, and nobody was able to rescue him. One day, a princess got lost in that forest and couldn't find her way back to her father's kingdom. She wandered about for 9 days and finally came to the iron stove. As she stood in front of it, she heard a voice from inside that asked, "Where do you come from, and where are you going?" "I've lost my way to my father's kingdom," she answered, "and I can't get back home." Then the voice from the iron stove said, "I'll help you get home again quickly if you'll promise to do what I ask. My father is a greater king than yours, and I want to marry you." Eagle much? She was frightened by this and thought, "Dear Lord, what shall I do with an iron stove?" That'd be pretty hot. But she wanted so very much to return home to her father that she promised to do what he asked. Then he said, "I want you to come back with a knife and scrape a hole in the iron." And he gave her an escort who walked beside her without saying a word and brought her home in 2 hours. Now, there was great rejoicing in the castle when the princess returned, and the old king embraced her and kissed her. Yet she was very sad and said, "Dear father, you can't imagine what happened to me. I'd never have been able to escape from the large, wild forest if I hadn't come across an iron stove. But I had to promise that I'd return there to rescue and marry it." The old king was so horrified by this that he almost fainted, for she was his only daughter. After some deliberation and defiguration, they decided to send Noah's beautiful daughter in her place. They led the maiden into the forest, gave her a knife, and told her to scrape away at the iron stove. She scraped for 24 hours, but couldn't make the slightest dent. At daybreak, a voice called out from the iron stove. It seems to me that it is dawn outside. It seems to me too, she answered. I think I can hear the chattering of my father's mill. So you're a miller's daughter? Then get out of here at once and tell them to send the king's daughter. She returned to the castle and told the old king what the man in the stove didn't want her. He wanted his daughter. The old king was horrified, and his daughter began to weep. However, she still had the swineherd's daughter, who was even more beautiful than the miller's daughter. They agreed to give her a nice sum of money to go to the iron stove in place of the king's daughter. So she was taken into the forest, and she too had to scrape for 24 hours. But she couldn't get anything off. At daybreak, a voice cried out from the stove. It seems to me that it's dawn outside. It seems to me too, she answered. I think I hear my father blowing his horn. So you're a swineherd's daughter. Get out of here at once, and have them send the king's daughter. Tell her that bad things will happen to her the way I promised if she doesn't come. The whole kingdom will collapse and be demolished. Not one stone will be left standing. Strong words from a guy stuck in a stove. When the king's daughter heard that, she began to cry. But there was nothing she could do. She had to keep her promise. She should have in the first place. So she took leave of her father, put a knife in her pocket, and went to the iron stove in the forest. When she got there, she started scraping, and the iron gave way. After 2 hours, she had managed to scrape a small hole. When she looked inside, she saw such a handsome prince glimmering in gold and jewels that her heart was swept away. Freaking gold digger. She continued scraping until she had made a hole large enough for him to crawl through. You're mine, he said, and I'm yours. You're my bride, and have set me free. Now she requested permission to see her father one more time before leaving with him, and the prince granted it. But she was not to say more than 3 words to her father, and then she was to return to the prince. So she went home, but spoke more than 3 words, whereupon the iron stove vanished immediately and was carried away over the glass mountain. And sharp swords. Yet the prince had been released and was no longer locked up in the stove. After this, the princess said goodbye to her father and took some money with her, though not much, and she went back to the large forest to look for the iron stove, which was not to be found. For 9 days she searched, until her hunger became so great that she didn't know what to do, and since she had nothing more to live on, when evening came, she climbed a small tree and sat down. She planned to spend the night there because she was afraid of wild animals. Then at midnight, she saw a little light in the distance and thought, oh, I think I'd be safe there. She climbed down the tree and went over towards the light, praying all along the way. Finally, she came to an old cottage with a great deal of grass growing around it and a small pile of wood in front. Oh, where have you landed? She thought. She looked through the window and saw nothing but small fat toads. And yet there was also a nicely covered table with wine and a roast, and the plates and cups were made of silver. So she summoned her courage and knocked on the door. A fat toad replied at once. Maiden, maiden, small. Hop to it, hop toad, and don't you fall. Hop toad's dog hopped back and forth and quickly see who's at the door. A small toad went to the door and opened it. When the princess entered, they all welcomed her and made her sit down while they asked, "Where have you come from, and where are you going?" She told them everything that had happened to her and how she had disobeyed the prince's command, not to say more than 3 words, which had caused the stove, along with the prince, to disappear. I just unplugged something. Nothing vital, thankfully. And now she had intended to search over hill and valley until she found it. Then the fat old toad said, "Maiden, maiden, green and small, hop to it, hop toad, don't you fall. Hop toad's dog, hop back and forth, do it sprightly. Fetch me the box as quick as can be." After the small toad left and came back with the box, they gave her food and drink and took her to a nicely made bed that was silk and velvet. She lay down on it and slept with God's blessing. When morning came and she got up, and the old toad gave her 3 needles from the box, which she was to take with her. She would need them because she had to cross over a high glass mountain, 3 sharp swords, and a great lake. If she could manage to do all that, then she would once again be with her beloved. The toad also gave her 3 objects that she was to guard very carefully, namely 3 big needles, a plow wheel, and 3 nuts. Upon receiving them, she departed, and when she came to the glass mountain, which was very slick, she stuck the 3 needles first beneath her feet, then ahead of them. This is why she managed to get over it. When she was on the other side, she hid them in a place that she marked carefully. Next, she came to 3 sharp swords, and she seated herself on the plow wheel and rolled over them. Finally, she came to the great lake, and after crossing it, she arrived at a large, beautiful castle. She went inside and saw it work as if she were a poor maiden who wanted to hire herself out. She knew, in fact, that the prince whom she had rescued from the iron stove in the big forest was in the castle. So the princess was taken on as a kitchen maid at low wages. Like all kitchen maids are anymore. The prince, in the meantime, had already found another maiden whom he wanted to marry, for he thought that the princess had long since died. That evening, after she had finished washing up and was through with her work, the kitchen maid searched in her pockets and found the 3 nuts the old toad had given her. She bit one open and was going to eat the kernel when, lo and behold, she discovered a splendid royal dress inside. When the bride heard about it, she came and asked if she could buy the dress. Indeed, she said that it was not fit for a servant girl, but the kitchen maid replied that she wouldn't sell it. Rather, the bride could have it if she allowed the maid to sleep one night in the bridegroom's chamber. The bride consented because she didn't have a dress that beautiful. When the evening came, she said to her bridegroom, That silly kitchen maid wants to sleep in your room. If you don't mind, neither do I. That's a prince for you. Nonetheless, the bride gave him a glass of wine with a sleeping potion in it. And then the bridegroom and the kitchen maid went into the bedchamber to sleep. But he slept so soundly that she couldn't wake him, and made her weep the entire night. I rescued you from the wild forest and the iron stove, she lamented. I searched for you, went across the glass mountain, 3 sharp swords in the great lake until I found you. And now you won't listen to me. You said. The servants outside the bedroom heard her weeping the entire night, and told their master the next day. When the kitchen maid had finally washed up that evening, she bit open the second nut, and there was, you guessed it, another dress, even more beautiful than the first. The bride saw it and wanted to buy this one too, but the kitchen maid didn't want money. She requested instead to sleep in the bridegroom's chamber again. However, the bride gave the prince another sleeping potion, and he slept so soundly that he couldn't hear a thing. The kitchen maid wept the entire night and lamented, I rescued you from the wild forest and the iron stove. I searched for you and went across a glass mountain, 3 sharp swords, and a great lake until I found you, and now you won't listen to me. The servants outside the bedroom door heard her weep the entire night, and told her master about this the next morning. When the kitchen maid had finished washing up on the third night, and bit open the third nut, she found a dress lined with pure gold that was even more beautiful than the other 2. Of course, when the bride saw it, she knew she wanted to have it, but the kitchen maid would only give it to her if she were granted permission to sleep in the bridegroom's chamber a third night. This time, however, the bridegroom was alert and didn't drink the sleeping potion when the kitchen maid began to weep and lament. Dearest love, I rescued you from the cruel wild forest and the iron stove. The prince jumped up and said, You are the true bride. You are mine, and I am yours. That night he got into a carriage with her, and they took away the false bride's dresses. They took away the false bride's dresses so that she couldn't get up. When they came to the great lake, they sailed across it. When they came to the 3 sharp swords, they sat down on the plow wheel. And when they came to the glass mountain, they stuck the needles into it. At last they arrived at the old cottage, and when they entered it, it became a large castle. The toads were released from the magic spell, and turned out to be princes and princesses, and they were all very happy. Then the wedding was celebrated, and the prince and the princess remained in the castle, which was larger than the castle of the king's daughter. However, since the king complained of being left alone, they traveled to him and brought him back to their castle. Now they had 2 kingdoms and lived a happily married life. So the toads were princes and princesses anyway, and they were in their castle. Why does the guy from the iron stove get to claim their castle? Honestly. And they were living there first. It was their cursed place. What happened to his kingdom and his father, who was so much better than hers? Oh, fairy tales. Remember, if you want to sleep with a prince, give the princess a dress. Okay. It has to be a very sparkly one, otherwise it won't work right. Anyway, Our next story, The Lazy Spinner. A man and his wife lived in a village, and the wife was so lazy that she never wanted to do any work. Whenever her husband gave her something to spin, she never finished it, and whatever it is she did spin, she didn't wind it, but left it tangled on the bobbin. If her husband scolded her, she used her quick tongue and said, "How can I wind up the yarn if I don't have a reel? You go into the forest first and fetch me one." "If that's the problem," her husband replied, "then I'll go into the forest and get some wood for a reel." Upon hearing this, his wife became anxious, because she'd have to wind the yarn and start spinning again, if he found the wood to make a reel. So she gave the matter some thought, and came up with a good idea. She secretly followed her husband into the forest, and just as he climbed up a tree and chose to cut the wood, she crawled up into some bushes below him, where he couldn't see her, and cried out, "He who chops..." Oh, Jesus, just because I'm doing it this way. "He who chops..." "He who chops wood for reels will die. She who winds yarn will be ruined all her life." The husband listened, and laid down his axe for a moment, and wondered what all this could possibly mean. "Oh well," he said, "I must have been hearing things. No need to get frightened. It's nothing." So he took his axe again, and was about to begin chopping, when he heard the voice from below once more. "She who chops wood for reels will die. She who winds yarn will be ruined for all her life." He stopped again, and in his fear and terror he tried to grasp what was happening. After some time had passed, his courage returned. He reached for his axe a third time, and was about to chop, when he heard the voice cry out loudly a third time, "He who chops wood for reels shall die. She who wants yarn will be ruined for life." This was too much for him, and he lost all desire to chop the wood. He quickly climbed down the tree and made his way home. His wife ran as fast as she could, via the byways, to get home before he did. When he arrived in the living room, she acted innocent, as if nothing had happened, and said, "Well, did you bring me a nice piece of wood for a reel?" "No," he said. "I realize that it makes no sense to wind," and he told her what had happened in the forest. Then he left her in peace. Yet some time later, the husband began complaining again about the messy condition of the home. "Wife," he said, "it's a disgrace the way that you leave your spun wool on the bobbin." "You know what?" she said. "Since we haven't managed to get a reel, you go up in the loft and I'll stand here below. Then I'll throw the yarn up to you and you can throw it back down to me, and that way we'll have a scheme." That works. Okay. "Yes, that'll work," said the husband. So they did this, and when they were finished, he said, "We've got yarn schemed. Now it needs to be boiled in a well." What? "We've got the yarn schemed. Now it needs to be boiled as well." Okay. His wife became uneasy again and said, "Yes, indeed. We'll boil it first thing tomorrow morning." But she was really thinking up a new trick. Early the next morning, she got up, made the fire, and put the kettle on it. But instead of putting the yarn in the kettle, she put a clump of wool and let it boil. After this, she went to her husband, who was still lying in bed, and said to him, I've got to go out for a little while. I want you to get up and look after the yarn that's in the kettle on the fire. Make sure you do this right away. Watch things closely, for if the cock crows and you're not taking care, the yarn will become wool." Wow, clever. The husband agreed, since he certainly didn't want anything to go wrong. He got up as fast as he could and went to the kitchen, but when he reached into the kettle and looked inside, he was horrified to discover nothing more than a clump of wool. Then the husband was quiet as a mouse, for he thought he had done something wrong and was to blame. In the future, he left his wife in peace when it came to yarn and spinning. Ah, emotional abuse much? Evil woman. I like her. I had to do the voice tracking because that was hilarious, but still. Where are we? We're at hour 20. Oh, good. That's pages are sticking together. Got to fix that. Not sticking together for particular reasons, so I'm just trying to separate them. There we go. So, our next. Why am I having such a trouble? Why am I having such a hard time saying next? Not pronouncing the T. Next. Next story is The Lion and the Frog. There once lived a king and a queen, and they had a son and a daughter who loved each other dearly. The aristocrats. The prince went hunting very often, and sometimes remained in the forest a long time. However, one day he didn't return. His sister almost wept herself blind because of this. Finally, when she could no longer stand it, she went into the forest to search for her brother. After she had gone a long way, she was too tired to go any further, and when she looked around her, a lion was standing nearby. He seemed friendly and very kind. So she sat down on his back, and the lion carried her away. As they went, he kept stroking her with his tail and cooling her cheeks. Now, lion boy. Got another cough drop. Give me a second. Stroking with his tail and cooling her cheeks. She was riding him. Anyway. After they had traveled a good distance, they came to a cave, and the lion carried her inside. She didn't get frightened, nor did she want to jump off the lion's back because he was so friendly. Frisky friendly, whatever. They went deeper into the cave, where it became darker and darker until it was eventually pitch black. Nevertheless, they proceeded for a while until they reached daylight again and were in a beautiful garden. Everything was fresh and glistened in the sun. In the middle of the garden was a magnificent palace. When they came to the gates, the lion stopped, and the princess climbed down from his back. Then the lion began to speak and said, "You shall live in this beautiful house and serve me. If you carry out all my orders, you shall see your brother again." Emotional blackmail. Cool. So the princess served the lion and obeyed all his commands. One day she went for a walk in the garden, where it was so very beautiful, and she was still sad because she was alone and forsaken by the world. As she walked here and there, she became aware of a pond, and in the middle of the pond there was a small island with a tent on it. Underneath the tent, she saw a frog, who was as green as grass and had a neat rose leaf on its head instead of a crown. The frog looked at her and said,
Why are you sad?
Ah, she replied. Why shouldn't I be sad? She told him her troubles. Then the frog said to her in a very friendly way,
If you need anything, just come to me, and I'll lend you a helping hand. No, Flipper, one or the other.
But how shall I pay you back?
You don't have to pay me back, said the frog. Just bring me a fresh rose leaf every day for my crown.
Will they be paying back? Oh. The princess returned to the palace and was somewhat comforted. Whenever the lion demanded something, she ran to the pond, and the frog hopped here and there and soon brought her what she needed. After a while, the lion said, This evening I'd like to get a gnat pie. It must be prepared very well. Gnat pie. The princess wondered how she could ever get something like that. It seemed impossible for her. She ran out and told her woes to the frog. But the frog said,
Don't worry, I'll make sure that you have a gnat pie.
He sat down, opened his mouth, left to right, and when he snapped it shut, he had caught as many gnats as he needed. Then he hopped here and there, gathered some wood shavings, and built a fire. Then he began burning. No, when it began burning, he kneaded the pie dough for the pie and put it over the coals. After 2 hours, the pie was finished, and one could not have wished for anything better. Yeah. Then he said to the maiden,
I won't give you the pie until you promise me that, when the lion is asleep, you'll cut off his head with a sword that's hidden beneath his bed.
What?
No, she said. I won't do it. The lion's always been good to me. If you don't do it, you'll never see your brother again, said the frog. Besides, you won't be harming the lion, not just decapitating it.
She summoned her courage and took the pie and brought it to the lion. That looks delicious, the lion said, and after sniffing it, he began to eat it right away and ate it all up. When he was finished, he felt tired and wanted to sleep a little. So he said to the princess, Come and sit down beside me and scratch behind my ears for a bit until I fall asleep. If anyone has ever seen lions in the wild, that is not a sign of sleeping time. Anyway, she sat down beside him and scratched him with her left hand, and with her right hand she reached for the sword that was lying behind the bed. After he had fallen asleep, she drew out the sword, closed her eyes, and chopped off the lion's head with one blow. But when she looked again, the lion had disappeared, and her dear brother stood next to her. He kissed her affectionately and said, You've released me from the spell, for I was a lion and had been cursed to remain so until Maiden's hand would chop off my head out of love for me as a lion. What? Oh. They went together into the garden to thank the frog. But when they got there, they saw that he was hopping all around, gathering together wood shavings to build a fire. When the fire was burning brightly, he hopped into it himself, and it burned a little more until he finally went out, and a beautiful maiden was standing there. This was the princess' sweetheart, who had also been cast under a magic spell. Now they all returned home to the old king and queen, and had a great wedding. Whoever attended did not go home with an empty stomach. Hopefully, they did not have gnat pie. Now, I guess anything's good pie if it's cooked pretty well enough, I guess. Not looking for a gnat pie recipe. Not at all.
You know, summer starting, I might be able to catch a few more. I'd rather have the 12 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie. It's, you know, so much airier. Okay. I'm on my fourth or fifth cough drop. Around an hour and a half in. So we shall continue to persevere. All right. Our next story, as things will happen, is The Soldier and the Carpenter. And not a story about ants. It might as well be. But it is The Soldier and the Carpenter. Two carpenters lived in a city in which their houses touched one another. Each carpenter had a son, and their children were always together and played with one another. That's why they went. Uh, Let me try this again because it's a little weird, weirdly worded anyway. We're Grimm fairy tale is kind of normal. Anyway, the soldier and the carpenter. Two carpenters lived in a city in which their houses touched one another. Each carpenter had a son, and their children were always together and played with one another. That's why they were called Little Knife and Little Fork, which likewise are always placed side by side at the table. Put it. When they grew up, they refused to be separated. Since one was courageous and the other timid, one became a soldier, and the other learned carpentry. As time came for the carpenter to go on his travels as a journeyman, the soldier didn't want to be left behind, so they set out together. When they reached the city, the carpenter went to work for a master craftsman. Since the soldier wanted to remain there too, he hired himself out as a servant in the same house. Everything would have gone well, but the soldier had no desire to work. He just loafed about, and it didn't take long for the master to send him packing. So he should have been a baker. Out of loyalty to his companion, the carpenter decided not to stay. He handed his resignation to his master and departed with the soldier. And that's how things continued to go. If they had work, it didn't last long because the soldier was lazy and would be sent away, and the carpenter didn't want to stay without him. One day they arrived in a large city, but when the soldier refused to lift a finger, he was dismissed the very first evening, and they had to leave that night. Now their way took them to the edge of a large, mysterious forest, and the timid carpenter said, "I'm not going to enter. I'm sure there are witches and ghosts jumping all over the place." But the soldier replied, "Huh, nonsense. I have yet to be afraid of things like that. Just afraid of hard work." The soldier went ahead, and since the timid carpenter didn't want to be separated from him, he went alone. In a short time, they lost their way, and wandered in darkness through the trees. Finally, they saw a light and headed in that direction until they came to a beautiful castle, and that was brightly lit. In front of the castle, there was a black dog, and nearby was a red swan on a pond. That's no good one. When they entered the castle, however, they didn't encounter a living creature until they went to the kitchen, where they found a gray cat standing by a pot on the fire cooking. They moved on and found many splendid rooms that were all empty. On one of them there was a table emptily covered with food and drink. Since they were both very hungry, they went over to the table and enjoyed a fine meal. Afterward, the soldier said, "Now that we've finished and full, we're entitled to some sleep." When they opened a room, he found two beautiful beds. So they lay down in them, and just as they were about to fall asleep, it occurred to the timid carpenter that they had not said their prayers. He got up and saw the cupboard on the wall. He opened it, and inside there was a crucifix with two prayer books. He immediately woke the soldier and got him up. Then they knelt down and said their prayers, and fell asleep once more in peace. The next morning the soldier felt such a violent blow that he jumped into the air. "Why are you hitting me?" he yelled at his companion, who had also received a blow, and replied, "Why did you hit me? Why did you hit me?" Then the soldier said, "It's probably a signal that we should get up." Duh. When they left the room, breakfast was already on the table. But the timid carpenter said, "Before we touch it, we should look for some people." "All right," said the soldier. "I agree. Anyway, since the cat prepared the cooked meal, I've lost my desire to eat it." So they went from the bottom of the castle to the top and couldn't find a soul. Finally, the soldier said, "Let's go search down the cellar, too." When they went down the stairs, they saw an old woman sitting in front of the first cellar. They began speaking to her and said, "Good day. Did you cook the good meal for us?"
"Yes, children. Did it taste all right?"
They went further and came to a second cellar where a young boy of 14 was sitting. They greeted him, too, but he didn't answer them. Finally, they moved to the third cellar, where a maiden of 12 was sitting, and she, too, didn't answer their greeting. Then they continued walking through all the cellars, but didn't find anyone else. When they returned, the maiden had already stood up from her seat, and they said to her, "Do you want to go upstairs with us?" But she asked,
"Is the red swan still in the pond up there?"
"Yes, we saw it at the entrance."
"That's sad. I can't go upstairs with you."
The young boy was also standing when they came to him, and they asked him, "Do you want to go upstairs with us?" But he said,
"Is the black dog still in the courtyard?"
"Yes, we saw him at the entrance." "That's sad. I can't go upstairs with you." When they came to the old woman, she had also stood up. "Granny," they said, "do you want to come upstairs with us?"
"Is the old gray cat still upstairs in the kitchen?"
"Yes, she's sitting by the hearth with a pot and cooking."
"That's sad. Unless you kill the red swan, the black dog, and the gray cat, can't leave the cellar."
When the two companions went upstairs and into the kitchen again, they wanted to pet the cat. But her fiery eyes began to flash, and she looked very wild. Now there was still room left that they hadn't yet explored. And when they opened it, they discovered that there was completely empty except for a bow and arrow, a sword, and iron tongs, which were hanging on the wall. Written above the bow and arrow were the words, "This will kill the red swan." Over the sword, "This will chop off the black dog's head." Over the tongues, "This will pinch off the gray cat's head." Poor cat. "Ah," said the timid carpenter, "let's get out of here." But the soldier replied, "No, let's go after the animals." Masochist. So they took the weapons off the wall and went to the kitchen, where the three animals, the swan, the dog, and the cat, were standing there as if they had been waiting to do something. When the timid carpenter saw them, he ran away. The soldier followed and tried to give his companion courage, but the carpenter wanted to eat first. After he had eaten, I saw 2 suits of armor in a room. I want to be put one on first. When he was in the room, he looked for an easy way to escape and said, We'd be better off if we climbed in through the window. Those animals are not our concern. However, when he went over to the window, he found strong iron bars in front of it. Now he no longer had a way out, and went over to the suits of armor. He had tried to put one on, but they were all too heavy. Then the soldier said, Stop this. Let's go the way we are. All right, said the other, but I wish there were 3 of us. Just as he uttered those words, a white dove began flapping its wings on the outside of the window and bumped up against it. The soldier opened the window, and as soon as the dove hopped inside, a handsome young man stood before them and said, I'll lend you support and help you. The young man picked up the bow and arrow, but the timid carpenter told him that he was taking the best part of the bargain with the bow and arrow because he'd be in good positions after he took out the shot to run wherever he wanted. On the other hand, the carpenter and the soldier would have to get physically closer to the enchanted animals to use their weapons. Upon hearing this, the young man exchanged the bow and arrow for the sword. And now all 3 went to the kitchen, where the animals were still together. The young man cut off the dog's head. The soldier grabbed the gray cat with the tongs, and the timid carpenter stood behind and shot the red swan dead. After all 3 animals were killed, the old woman and her 2 children came running up from the cellar all at once and let out a great cry. You've killed our dearest friends, you traitors! They charged at the men and wanted to murder them, but all 3 men overpowered them and killed them with the weapons. Once they were dead, the men suddenly began to hear all around strange murmuring sounds that came from all corners. Then the timid carpenter said, Let's bury all the bodies. After all, they were Christians. And we know this from the crucifix. Were they? Was it their crucifix? The animals were their friends. No. So they carried the bodies out to the courtyard and dug 3 graves and laid them down inside. While they were working, however, the murmuring in the castle increased. It became louder and louder, and when they were finished with their work, they heard real voices among the murmurs, and one called out, Who are you? Who are you? Since the handsome young man had disappeared, they became afraid and ran away. After they had gone a little way, the soldier said, Hey, we shouldn't have run away. Let's go back and see what's there. No, the other said. I want nothing to do with those bewitched creatures. I want to get to the city and earn an honest living. But the soldier gave him no peace until he went back with him. When they got to the front of the castle, everything was full of life. Horses dashed through the courtyard, and servants ran back and forth. They pretended to be 2 poor journeymen and asked for a little something to eat. One of the people said, Yes, just come inside. Everyone will be helped today. They were led into a beautiful room and were given food and wine. Afterward, they were asked whether they had seen 2 young men coming from the castle. No, they said. But when someone saw that they had blood on their hands, he asked, Where did the blood come from? I cut my finger, replied the soldier. However, the servant went and told his master, who came himself to see who they were. Indeed, it was the handsome young man who had come to their aid. And when he laid eyes on them, he cried out, These are the 2 who saved my castle! He welcomed them with great joy and told them how everything had happened. A housekeeper was living in the castle with her 2 children. However, she was really a witch, and one time when her master scolded her, she replied by doing some evil and transformed all living things in the castle to stone. when there were 3 other servants who also knew something about magic, and she had no real power over them and could only turn them into animals. They did their mischief upstairs in the castle, and since she was afraid of them, she fled into the cellar with her children. She had only limited power over me as well, so she changed me into a white dove, but only as long as I was outside the castle. Inside, I could be myself. When you two came into the castle, you were supposed to kill the animals so she would be free. As a reward, she wanted to kill you. The god had things turn out better. The castle was no longer enchanted, and in the very next moments that the wicked witch and her children were killed, the people who had been turned into stone began to live again. The murmuring sounds you heard were the words of these people who spoke upon being freed. The young man then gave the 2 companions to the lord of the castle, who gave them his 2 beautiful daughters, and they lived happily ever after as great knights until the end of their days. Wow, okay, that's one way to do it. Oh crap, this next one's a fun one to say. Pif-Paf-Poltree. Why? I've read this one before. This one was in the Irish fairy tales. This one's such a freaking tongue twister. Okay. I'm not doing any voices on the... I'm gonna do the voices anyway. I can't say it about that too. This one's a pain. Anyway, the next story. Pretty Katrinelya and the Pif-Paf-Poltree. Good day, Father Berry Tree. Berry Tea. Why, thank you, Pif-Paf-Poltree. Could I have your daughter for my wife? Oh, yes, if Mother Milk Cow, Brother High and Mighty, Sister Dear Cheese, and Pretty Catalina are willing, then you can have her. Then where can I find Mother Milk Cow? In the barn, milking the cow. Good day, Mother Milk Cow. Why, thank you, Pif-Paf-Poltree. Could I have your daughter for my wife? Oh, yes, if Father Berry Tea, Brothers High and Mighty, and Sister Dear Cheese, and Pretty Katrinelya are willing, then you can have her. Then where can I find Brother High and Mighty? In the shed, chopping up all the wood he can see. Good day, Brother High and Mighty. Why, thank you, Pif-Paf-Poltree. Could I have your sister for my wife? Oh, yes, if Father Berry Tea, Mother Milk Cow, Sister Dear Cheese, and Pretty Katrinelya are willing, then you can have her. Then where can I find Sister Dear Cheese? Weeding in the garden, if you please. Good day, Sister Dear Cheese. Why, thank you, Pif-Paf-Poltree. Could I have your sister for my wife? Oh, yes, if Father Berry Tea, Mother Milk Cow, Brother High and Mighty, and Pretty Katrinelya are all willing, then you can have her. Then where can I find Pretty Katrinelya? Counting on her pennies in the parlor. Good day, Pretty Katrinelya. Why, thank you, Pif-Paf-Poltree. Do you want to be my bride? Oh, yes. If Father Berry Tree, Mother Milk Cow, Brother High and Mighty, and Sister Dear Cheese are willing, then I will be your bride. Pretty Katrinelya, how much dowry do you have? 14 pennies in cash, 3.5 coins that are owed to me, half a pound of dried fruits, a handful of pretzels, and a handful of roots. As you can surely see, that makes for a fine dowry. Now, Pif-Paf-Poltree, what is it that you do? Do you? Are you a tailor? Much better than that. A shoemaker? Much better than that. A farmer? Much better than that. A carpenter. Much better than that. A blacksmith. Much better than that. A miller. Much better than that. Perhaps you are a broom maker. Yes, that's what I am. Isn't that a wonderful way to earn a living? Not bad. I only stumbled the one time. But I really don't want to go back and read it again. Can you blame me? Pif-Paf-Poltree and pretty Katrinelya. Okay, we might get 1, 2, or 3 more stories in before we hit the 2-hour mark, which I've kind of set as my daily limit, because it's just easier to achieve. And 2 hours of Brothers Grimm is really more than anyone can stand, isn't it? I know, it hasn't been 2 hours of Brothers Grimm because I had the chatting stuff going beforehand, but still. Though the coughing has gotten annoying, to me anyway. Especially with that last one. I have downed 2 bottles of water. 2.5 technically. But oh well. Okay. Our next wonderful tale. The Fox and the Horse. A farmer had a faithful horse that had grown old and could no longer do his work. So his master didn't want to feed him anymore and said, "You're of no more use to me now, but I won't abandon you entirely. Show me that you're still strong enough to bring me a lion, and then I'll keep you. But for now, get out of my stable." Seriously? And he chased the horse out into the open field. The horse was sad about this and went into the forest to seek a little shelter from the weather. There he met a fox, who asked, with a long face, "Why are you hanging your head and moping all by yourself?" Answered the horse. "Greed and loyalty can't live side by side in the same house. My master's forgotten how much work I've done for him over the years, and since I can no longer plow properly, he won't feed me and has chased me away." "Without a word of consolation?" asked the fox. The consolation was meager. He told me that if I was still strong enough to bring him a lion, he would keep me, but he knows full well that I can't do that. That's no consolation at all. "Well, I'm going to help you," said the fox. "Just lie down and stretch yourself out and don't move. Pretend that you're dead." The fox did. The horse did what the fox commanded, while the fox went to the lion, whose den was not very far away, and said, "There's a dead horse lying around out there. If you want a great meal, come along with me." The lion went with him, and when he saw the horse's side, the fox said, "It's not so comfortable for you here, you know. What I'll do, I'll tie the horse to you by its tail, and you can drag him and eat him in peace, quiet." The lion liked that idea, and assumed the position for the fox to attach the horse to him, and kept still. However, the fox bound the lion's legs together with the horse's tail, and he tied and twisted it so tightly and firmly that the lion wouldn't be able to tear himself loose, even if he had used all his might. When the fox finally finished his work, he tapped the horse on the shoulder and said, "Pull, horse, pull!" All at once the horse jumped up and dragged the lion with him. The lion began to roar so loudly that all the birds in the forest flew out of fright. Ugh. But the horse let him roar and pulled and dragged him over the fields to his master's door. When his master saw that, he reconsidered everything in a better light, and said to the horse, "You shall stay here with me, and shall be treated well." And he gave him all he wanted to eat until the day of the horse's death. I hope the fox at least got some food out of it. Well, the fox got rid of his biggest competitor, I guess. Or the long face. Horses. No, get out. At least it wasn't a bear. Okay. I'm going to say one more story, and that will probably leave one more week's worth of reading. Damn. Okay. Our final story for the night: The Worn Out Dancing Shoes. Once upon a time, there was a king who had 12 daughters, one more beautiful than the other. They slept together in a large room, where their beds stood side by side, and in the evening, when they went to sleep, the king shut and locked the door. However, every morning, their shoes were worn out from dancing, and nobody knew where they had been and how it kept happening. So the king issued a royal proclamation that whoever could find out where his daughters danced during the night could choose one of them for his wife and be the king after his death. But anyone who came and failed to uncover everything after 3 days and nights would lose his life. Not long after his proclamation, a prince came and was well received. In the evening, he was conducted to a room adjoining the bedchamber of the king's daughters. His bed was set up there, and he was told to watch and find out where they went dancing. And just to make sure they couldn't do anything in secret or go out anywhere else, the door to their room that led to his was kept open. Nice. However, the prince fell asleep, and when he awoke the next morning, all 12 of them had been to a dance, for their shoes were standing there with holes in the soles. Lousy wordsmanship. The same thing happened the second night, and the third, and his head was cut off. After there were many who came to try their luck, but they all left their lives behind them. Now, it so happened that a poor soldier, who had been wounded and could no longer serve in the army, traveled toward the city where the king lived. Along the way, he met an old woman who asked him where he was going. "I don't really know myself," he said, "but I'd certainly like to find out where the king's daughters go dancing, where they wear their shoes out, so I could become king."
Oh, that's not so difficult,
said the old woman.
"Just don't drink the wine that's brought to you in the evening, and then pretend that you've fallen asleep.
She also gave him a little cloak and added,
When you put this cloak on, you'll be invisible, and you'll be able to follow all 12 of them."
After receiving such good advice, the soldier now became serious about the entire matter, and plucked up his courage to present himself in front of the king like a suitor. He was welcomed just as cordially as the others had been, and was given royal garments to put on. In the evening, at bedtime, he was led to the antechamber, and as he was preparing to go to bed, the oldest daughter brought him a beaker of wine. But he had tied a sponge underneath his chin, let the wine run into it, and didn't drink a single drop. Then he lay down, and after lying there a little while, he began to snore, as if in a very deep sleep. When the princesses heard this snoring, They laughed, and the oldest said, "You too could have saved his life." After this, they stood up, opened their closets, chests, and boxes, took out splendid clothes. They groomed themselves in front of their mirror, and hurried about, eager to attend the dance. But the youngest said,
I don't know. You're all happy, yet I have a strange feeling. I'm not. I'm sure that something bad is going to happen to us.
"A silly goose," said the oldest.
You're always afraid. Have you forgotten how many princes have already tried in vain? I didn't really need to give the soldier a sleeping potion. He'd never had wakened, even with all that.
When they were all ready, they first took a look at the soldier, but he had shut his eyes tight, and since he neither moved nor stirred, they thought he was definitely safe. So the oldest went to her bed and knocked on it. Immediately it sank into the ground, and the trapdoor opened. The soldier watched them climb down to the opening, one after another, and the oldest in the lead. Since there was no time to lose, he got up and put on his little cloak, and climbed down after the youngest. Halfway down the stairs, he stepped on her dress slightly, causing her to become terrified and cry,
What's that? Who's holding my dress?
"Don't be so stupid," said the oldest.
You've caught it on a hook.
They went all the way down, and when they were at the bottom, they stood in the middle of a marvelous avenue of trees, whose leaves were all made of silver, glittered and gleamed. "I'd better take a piece of evidence with me," the soldier thought, and broke off a branch. But the tree cracked and made a tremendous sound. Again the youngest called out,
Something's wrong. Did you hear the noise? That's never happened before.
but the older said,
It was just a burst of joy because we'll soon be dancing with our princess set free from the curse.
Then they came to another avenue of trees, where all the leaves were made of gold, and finally to one where all the leaves were made of pure diamond. The soldier broke off branches from each kind, and each time there was a crackling sound that caused the youngest sister to be terrified. But the oldest maintained that they were just bursts of joy. They went on to a large lake with 12 boats on it. In each boat sat a handsome prince. They had been waiting for the 12 princesses, and each one took a princess in his boat. While the soldiers went aboard with the youngest princess, then her prince said,
I don't understand it, but the boat is much heavier today. Guess I'll have to row with all my might to get it moving. It's probably due to the warm weather, said the youngest. I feel quite hot, too.
On the other side of this lake stood a beautiful, brightly lit palace, and sounds of merry music with drums and trumpets could be heard from it. They rode over there and entered the palace, but each prince danced with the princess. The soldier danced invisibly as well, and whenever a princess went to drink from a beaker of wine, he would drain it dry before it could reach her lips. The youngest sister was terribly anxious about this too, but the eldest continued to quiet her down. They danced until 3 in the morning, when all the shoes were worn through, and they had to stop. The princes rowed them back across the lake, and this time the soldier sat in the first boat with the eldest sister. The princesses took leave of their princes on the beach, and promised to return the following night. When they reached the stairs, the soldier ran ahead of them to get into bed. By the time the 12 princesses came tripping slowly and wearily up the stairs, he was again snoring so loudly that they said,
Well, he's certainly safe from him.
Then they took off their beautiful clothes and put them away, placed the worn-out shoes under their beds, and lay down to sleep. The next morning the soldier decided not to say anything, but rather to follow and observe the strange life for the next 2 nights. Everything happened just as it had the first night. They each danced until the time their shoes were worn out. However, the third time he took a beaker with him for evidence. When the time came for him to give his answer, he took along the 3 branches and beaker and went before the king. The 12 princesses stood behind the door and listened to what he would say. When the king asked, "Where have my daughters been spending these nights wearing out their shoes?" he answered, "With 12 princes in an underground palace." And then he told him everything and produced the evidence. Immediately thereafter, the king summoned his daughters and asked them whether the soldier had told the truth. When they saw what had been exposed, and that denying anything would not help, they had to confess everything. Finally, the king asked the soldier which princess he would ask for his wife. "I'm no longer so young," he answered, "so I'll take the oldest." The wedding was held the same day, and the king promised to make him his successor to the kingdom after his death. The princes, however, were compelled to remain under a curse for as many nights as they had danced with the princesses. Yeah, so line steady. Okay, is it gonna work this time? Sorta. Kinda working. Uh we covered about 30 some odd pages, I think. We ended on page 435. Last page of the story on it again. We only have 38 pages left of this book. I need suggestions, Cubs. Not that I don't have books, I just like getting ideas from you guys. I mean, I'm going to do the controversial book about the South on Thursdays. And I can probably run through Aesop's Fables on Fridays. I will be gone for a week in July. Think Sunday through Saturday. Let me look at my phone. Because I do have a phone. It's modern times and such. Oh, I actually have a towel. Cool. Calendar. I've not found a job yet, so I have no reason not to go on vacation. Which sounds backwards. Okay. So I will be gone from looks like the 5th until the 12th. So we got one more week, then I'm off for a week. You know, it's about find a story to read by then. As I do have the Aesop's Fables I can read. Oh, crap. I've missed a lot of these. Let's see what happens when I turn off notifications. I've got 5 town questions that I haven't answered. I'll explain why I haven't got any notices about them because I turned off the notifications. I will do these after I finish up here, I guess. Interesting question on here. Is there someone you want to be friends with again? Who cheats more often, guys or girls? Is there something that men can do that women can't? What is the reason so many people were having a hard time opening up? Well, good question. Oh, definitely have to answer that one. What shouldn't be made fun of? Everything. Okay. uh, Honestly, people have a hard time opening up because it's hard to open up. Because everyone is worried about being judged. I will probably. V2 Studio, what are you doing? Why you got me short again? Okay. Anyway. Oh. There goes. Oh, that might not too big. Dang it. This is my set distance. This is as far as I am from the camera. Okay. Anyway. Let's see who we can raid. If anyone has any suggestions, feel free to let me know. I don't know. I feel like often talking to an empty theater, but hey, that's what happens. The story tells all the time, right? Okay. Let me see who's on. Is Wonk still on? I do not see Wonk. Okay, well, we didn't stay on long enough for me to. Oh, no, he is still on. Oh, Duska's on again. Oh, God, excuse me. Okay, What's in the Sky. To. A lot of people that I follow that I don't think I've rated. Let's see. Oh, on. What the hell? Random active YouTube Studio Readery. I haven't do anything to it. Just tricking out. I kind of feel this right now. So, any suggestions? Damn it, YouTube Studio. What are you doing? You're killing me, your smalls. Okay. Well, I really can't think of anyone to. What the hell? What are you doing? YouTube Studio is just going batshit crazy here for me. Model's locked and everything, and it just keeps going. I'm not touching it at all. And it's nowhere near the mouse. Program's minimized on screen, so it's not even showing for me to do anything. Uh, I don't know. Yeah, just red ball. And there he goes again. What the hell? I'm clipping that. That's what I'm going to try to. Okay. Hey, cat. What's up? Oh, I did not catch the me. Oh, cool. Did the emojis on my clipping stuff. Cool. Okay. Yeah. Read. Okay. Born gross. There you go. Raid has been created. Now I guess I will go to this. And yeah, let's do the thing. Good night, Cubs. May sneak on tomorrow or so and do a movie. So be good. Maybe I'll stop coughing by then.